Thank you, John Laux. If you don't know John's music, it's original music. We are gifted in this community to be a magnet for cultural creatives. And so we are so grateful for all of our songwriters that choose to tithe of their time, and they freely give because they are part of Unity Village Chapel. And when they're part of Unity Village Chapel, they give their talents back to Unity Village Chapel, sharing that with you. And so that's a song that John wrote for the LGBTQ community in loving and in processing. And that song also seems to fit any place or space where a human being is marginalized. So any time that there is racism, any time that because of religion people judge or separate, any time because someone is born with uniqueness or special abilities and they're not honored, any time that there is for any reason anyone that is parented in a way that less than honors their wholeness and their holiness, or is taught that they are in any way separate, different, or not okay, I think that song is a tribute and an honor to them. There are a lot of examples in our world of how we can honor wholeness, how we can really see that our diversity and our uniqueness is what makes us strong, that we can see that we can learn from each other and be very gifted and blessed by becoming compassionate and sensitive to our differences, no? That in fact, if we take that journey and we take differences as being a journey of awakening, then we stop saying judgmental things and we start realizing that I don't understand something about this or that or them yet. And we recognize that if we do what is ours to do, that means I have a little more getting to know you to do. Because I think the truth of the spiritual life is that if we allow ourselves to get to know, to truly get to know the depth of anyone, any person, anything, we will fall in love, deeply in love. And we will recognize that which cannot just be taught or bought in books, that which only comes through the heart. And that is that we're all one. In Unity, that's one of our spiritual practices and our spiritual principles. But to take that to a true level of depth, a true level of heart knowing is another thing. We have our beloved Rana in the PowerPoint booth. Can you hear me, Rana? She is one of our sacred service volunteers, and we're going to play a couple of videos this morning. So there's a little navigating that you're going to see on the screen here for a little bit. And if you've seen this first one already, no worries, just breathe into it for other people's hearts that are going to be opening to this video in a second. This video, just give you a little background, is with the Pope, this Pope that I love. In the video, a little boy comes up to ask the Pope a question. There were some parts that you couldn't get because that last line was cut off on each one. But essentially, the little boy's father died. And his father, he said, was an atheist. And so he asked the Pope, is his father going to heaven? When I saw that part, I was like holding my breath, going, I know this Pope, I love this Pope. Please, Pope. Come on, baby. I know there's going to be backlash, but you can do it. You know the truth. You can do it. But that just sounded like Ellis. If you aren't going to come next week, you've got to change your plans and you have to come. Because if you like lively emotion and aliveness, that was just Ellis that just popped through me with that laugh and that smile. And you will not regret the evening. It will feed your soul like this kind of experience right here. So this little boy is asking the Pope this, and he said, so, and my father was an atheist, and so, how is he going to be? Like, how is his soul? And the Pope just graciously just embraced that little boy and responded, and actually had the people that were visiting, that were there asking the questions too, go with him through this process of answering. And he said, your father, clearly by seeing you, your father was a good man. And he honored the boy's courage to cry and the boy's courage to share, and honored his manhood, his personhood for doing that. And he said, clearly, if you are the evidence of your father's life, your father was a good man. And then he asked everybody, like, would your father not love and bless and support and embrace a good man? And everyone's like, I'm sure they're kind of like, what are we supposed to say? 'Cause I'm sure the real answer, I thought it was no, he would not. But yes, he would, of course he would embrace him. And so he goes on to say that, and then he goes on to talk about how his father had even more strength and courage, because it would have been harder as an atheist to have your child baptized, to have this little boy baptized, than as a believer. So as a non-believer, to step into that and to honor the process of having this little boy baptized, then, if it had been his faith, he was actually calling out that this man had a depth of faith and strength, and that he had, in fact, everything that was needed to be loved by our source. But how often is that not the teaching? How often is that not what we're told? When I saw that video, I thought, good job, Pope. Because, and I think that he doesn't care if he goes out on a limb. He's been out on enough. He's like, he just flies. He really is tuned in and connected to, what his God guidance system is. Not what he's supposed to do or say or the role he's supposed to play. But I think that he tunes into the highest that he has available to him. But when will we stop using God to traumatize our children? It's heartbreaking enough that a little boy at that age would lose their father, right? That any child would. But then to have it on that child's heart that they're wondering if their parent went to the right place, or is safe or saved or okay. And I don't mean this to offend in any way, because there are a lot of people that have religious practices and spiritual beliefs that leave a lot of people out. And in Unity, we try to really honor all spiritual practices. We do say with that, in the diversity of paths that lead to enlightenment. But I think, and this may be radical and it may be offensive to say, but I think that someday we might call it child abuse. I think someday we might call it child abuse to tell a child that they are unloved, or that someone else is not going to heaven. I have a friend that shared a story. She saw a video of a relative of hers, and she's a Unity person, but she saw a video of a relative of hers that was telling their little girl, and they were videotaping it, but they told their little girl, who was just young at the time, probably under 7 years old, and about her friends and being saved by their religion, which was a Christian-based religion based on Jesus and taking Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And they were telling her that anyone who didn't goes to hell, and they, telling her probably a bit about hell and what it's like there. And the little girl, in processing and realizing that means a lot of her friends are not going to where she's going, and a lot of her friends are not safe and not okay and not saved, but they're going to hell. She just started crying. She just started losing it. And, I think they even posted this, online, like on Facebook, as a testimony of like, yep, that's what happens, and we're strong in our faith. To take the concept of what birthed us what created us as such intricately profound, capable creatures of light and love, to take that and use it for fear, manipulation, domination, to use it for any sort of limitation, I feel like is one of the greatest sins of our era and probably our history. And by sin, I mean missing the mark, the archery term, not getting it right, not hitting the nail on the head. John Shelby Spong is a leader in what I would call our movement, the New Thought movement. He came from a different background, Episcopalian priest, and he now does a lot of teaching and speaking on the Bible and on religious abuse and on religious history. And he says this, he says, our English language really says, if you're not a theist, the only alternative is to be an atheist. If you're not a theist, your only alternative is to be an atheist. What I'm trying to do is develop a language that will enable us to talk about God beyond what I think are the sterile categories of theism and atheism. A lot of people in Unity have heard, when people say, I don't believe in God, they've heard, what I remember first hearing from Wendy Craig Purcell in her book, Ask Yourself This, was the idea of, well, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And really, we make things so black and white, we categorize things rather than letting things be alive and organic and allowing space for people to evolve. People don't come out, babies don't come out, with a Bible and a religion and a mindset. We are creatures that expand and grow when we're supported. But we tend to challenge ourselves. And when we challenge ourselves, it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of strength to break out of paradigms that don't match our heart's longing, our heart's knowing, or the truth that we begin to sense. If we sense something's off, it probably is. Rana, will you give us the next video? Hell, he said, is knowing the truth and lacking the courage to live it. Hell is knowing the truth and lacking the courage to live it. In Unity that fits, we teach that heaven and hell are states of consciousness. You can have either one of them right here and right now. You can have either one of them after you're in your freedom form. He also said if we need to consult an ancient book to know what to do when a human being is in front of us, I think we're screwed already. In Unity, we use the Bible as a metaphysical tool book, a metaphysical journey from Adam consciousness and Eve consciousness to Christ mind or the awakened, anointed mind. Christ is not a man. He's not attached only to Jesus. It was demonstrated in and through and as Jesus and is available to all of creation. It is the idea of awakening and awakened personhood in the mind of the Creator, in the mind of all creation. And Adam and Eve and the fall from the garden is not about stepping into sin. It's about waking up to duality. It's about realizing and being able to have free will enough to step aside and judge and criticize, to step aside and realize that one is clothed, one is not clothed, but that doesn't have anything to do with being unworthy. That has to do with the journey of taking on the spiritual practice of awakening, the spiritual practice of our evolution. There's a great cost to staying asleep. I do think that some of the religious intolerance we have today is quite similar to racism. Anytime we take any person or any group and we categorically say, these ones don't fit, these ones aren't worthy, these ones shall be marginalized because of any sort of human concept, we are seriously missing the mark. John Shelby Spong also said, when I grew up in the South, I was taught segregation was the will of God, and the Bible was quoted to prove it. I was taught that women were by nature inferior to men, and the Bible was quoted to prove it. I was taught it was okay to hate other religions, especially the Jews, and the Bible was quoted to prove it. Can we be in a space where we can be love, even in the face of everything we see, even in the face of the different ideas? But can we courageously step into inviting ourselves into deeper expressions and experiences of love, and inviting our world and our brothers and sisters into deeper experiences of love, not through criticism, not through judgment, but through conscious conversations, through courage, through love, and through wisdom? There's a lot of programming and reprogramming that happens in our world. My friend that saw that video of her niece also recounted being young herself and being told that the sky would turn red with blood and Jesus would come to save a few people. Pretty scary for a kid to hear. She's now in her 60s. And though she knows differently and has a different experience of that story, it's still in the framework. It's still part of her history of what she's moved past. It's still a memory. There is no such creator, love, or light that would tell some of us that we are worthy and others that they are not. I think that it is ours to be aware of anything and any mentality that justifies dominion, superiority, and exclusion. The good news is that the newest studies are showing that most people are becoming more interested in spirituality and less interested in what they interpret as the God of the Bible. That's a growing trend. Because the truth is, you were never broken. The truth is, you are born blessed. You are never broken, and you are always blessed. Even in the midst of your most brokenness, we are actually at the edge of our creation. We are at the edge of the potential of what is growing us into our next self, our next best self, our next evolving self. So why would we torture ourselves in the midst of that? It's ours to check in with the God of our being. It's ours to have strength, courage, and wisdom. The strength to check in. Anytime we see anything that seems dehumanizing or that feels off, or we hear something that would validly horrify a child, check in. It probably is validly horrifying. We're just used to it. Have the courage to remain true to yourself, to be true to ourselves. Would you be willing to stand in your truth in light of $2.8 million and your job going down the tubes? Would you be willing to stand in your truth in light of your family and friends disowning you? Would you be willing to stand in your truth in the face of other people calling you a liar or dehumanizing you? Are we willing to stand in love and simply bless? Not let it make more anger, but just allow understanding and blessing to be there. Are we willing to use our power of discernment, our wisdom to discern? That's what that pastor was talking about, Ryan, when he said, you know, if you really need a book there or someone to interpret that book, because everyone knows, right? There is no one that doesn't interpret the Bible, right? I mean, everywhere you see it used, someone's interpreting it, period. Otherwise, a lot of crazy stuff would be happening. crazier than the crazy that we already see if we were following it. So people are always interpreting. It's high time that we declassify the interpreters and recognize that that is a divine birthright given to each and every one of us. I close with Proverbs 3:13, one of my favorite passages. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is her right hand. In her left are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. Those who hold her fast will be blessed. Namaste.